Okay, great. So welcome again. Tonight's presentation is on fine and visual motor skills. And here to present, we have two of our occupational therapists from CST. We have Samantha Holshoe, who's been at CST for about 2 years now, and Ashley, who just joined our team in the summer, but comes with a lot of years of experience. So I'll let them introduce themselves and take it away.
Well, hi, I'm Samantha, as Allie said. I am a senior clinician at Chicago Occupational Therapy, and I'm also a board member of our state organization, the Illinois Occupational Therapy Association. On their sensory integration and processing, I'm a co-chair. And things I like to do outside of OT are enjoy being outside, spending time on the lake, and just hanging out with my family and friends.
Hi, my name is Ashley Raybell. I'm also a senior clinician at CST. I have about 10 years of experience in OT, mostly in the school-based setting and also some in the early intervention setting. So I'm happy to be here in outpatient. Some things that I like to do outside of work are traveling, cooking, and spending time with my family and friends.
Cool. So to get us started, we're so happy you guys are here, and we're happy to kind of just chat about these two topics that are under our umbrella of occupational therapy. So this is like a nice little handout to help you kind of understand the diverse aspect of what occupational therapy holds. We wear a lot of hats, is what I like to say. We definitely cover a lot of different areas for our kiddos. So today we're really only going to be talking about two of them, the fine motor and the visual motor aspect. But as you can see, there's a lot more areas that we also address too.
So some of those foundational skills that we definitely need before completing or participating in fine motor and visual motor activities, first and foremost being strength. We need the ability of our core muscles, our upper extremity muscles, and our hand muscles to be able to complete these activities. So core in that, we need to be able to sit up straight and attentively, move our arms, shoulders, wrists, and the muscles of our hands to be able to complete these activities. Another very important one is ocular motor skills. Three basic types of these skills are fixations, which is the ability of our eyes to just focus on one target without moving them. Saccades, which is the ability to accurately move from one target to another. So we think about that, and especially school-age children, looking at the board, copying text. And then pursuits. So our ability of our eyes to follow moving targets. And we use that a lot when we play sports, throwing balls, kicking balls, and things like that. Postural control, that's again the ability to sit upright, which we'll address a little bit later. Body awareness, which is just where our body is in space, the ability to control our body and have a calm body, especially in order to complete these tasks. Attention and regulation, which is a big one that we address in OT, especially with some of the kiddos that we work with. We want to make sure that they are attending, that their body is calm, that they're not dysregulated or inattentive. Obviously, in order to complete anything in our life, we need to be able to sustain attention and maintain a calm and regulated body in order to perform at our maximal potential. And then bilateral coordination, using both of our hands simultaneously to complete tasks.
Great. So we're going to go into our first topic, fine motor skills. What are they? So fine motor skills are the fine and precise movements of the hand. They begin at age 3 months and they continue throughout the lifespan. With fine motor skills, we're going to go over like the developmental milestones of each fine motor skill, but we use them all the time in more ways than we can probably even think of. Such as like playing with toys, we use our fine motor skills, holding a pencil, manipulating any small item, getting dressed, using our self-care skills, also using our academic and functional play skills as well. And then Ashley's going to go through the grasp development with us too.
Yeah, so in those early months before 1 year, we start to see the digital and the pincer grasp prominently in a lot of the activities. So for example, we have this little visual here. It might be hard to see, so I'm going to kind of demonstrate it. But around the age of 8 months, we want to see that radial digital grasp, which is kind of holding something with all of your fingers and your thumb. So I don't know if you guys can see that okay, but that's kind of something that we want to see. We see it with toy play, or sometimes we see it when they're self-feeding. And then around 9 months is when we start to see that isolation of our index finger and our thumb. So it might be towards the back, the pads of our fingers, or maybe underneath the first knuckle of our fingers. And then at 12 months, around 1 year, we want to see that refined pincer grasp. So really just holding items towards the tips of our fingers. Those are kind of the milestones that we want to see. We see this a lot with, like, if you think about the foods that children eat at this age, like puffs and Cheerios and things like that, they're often grasping. Sometimes it's a rake. It emerges first as a raking motion. And then we start to see them kind of pick it up with maybe all of their fingers, and then maybe 3 of their fingers. And then we really want to promote this pincer grasp towards 1 year. And then when we progress towards holding utensils, a palm or supinate is usually what we first see, which is something like this. Around 2 to 3, we see that digital pronate. So it would be our index finger kind of pointed toward the paper, towards the tip of the writing utensil. And then 3.5, we start to see that static tripod grasp. So that might be pencils straight in the air, holding the utensil with 3 fingers, really moving most of the arm and the wrist with not much dynamic movement of just the fingers. And then at 4.5 to 5 years, we want to see that dynamic tripod grasp, which is, like I said, moving just your fingers when you're writing, drawing, coloring, things like that.
Great. So next we'll talk about some at-home strategies to kind of facilitate those different developmental milestones. Like Ashley said, feeding is a great one for your little ones. I feel like that is also most motivating. Every kid loves food. So grabbing those little food items with that pincer grasp to really initiate it is a great way to help with that. Playing with small items, similar. Maybe it's doing beads if they're old enough where they're not going to put it in their mouth. Maybe playing with beads and building with blocks. Doing peg puzzles are also a big one. So having them that also works on our next skill. We'll talk about visual motor skills, but using our pincer grasp, or those baby shark fingers, which is our last little dot or point I have on here. The baby shark fingers are kind of what we use as our terminology when we're teaching kiddos how to use that pincer grasp, because every kid loves baby shark. So those baby shark fingers, if you ever hear your kiddos saying that, they've probably heard it from one of us. Other things for at-home strategies, that upper arm strength is key prior to getting those developmental milestones and hitting those milestones. So wheelbarrow walks for arm strength are great. Wheelbarrow walks are when you hold your child's ankles and their hands are on the ground and they walk with their hands. A lot of kids love them. They're just so fun because their head's inverted. So not only are they getting that strength, they're also getting some input and some sensory, and it's a fun way to walk around. Another way is encouraging your kiddos to use their hands to pull and push a resistive item. So anything from Theraputty to Play-Doh to pop tubes, which are those big plastic tubes that you open and they make huge accordion sounds, and then you close them and they also make sounds. Those are fun, and that's a great way to encourage that fine motor development. Another key one too, using their arms and hands to transition from seated to standing. So when they're little and they're starting to learn how to stand up, having them use their arms to pull themselves up, because they're using that natural arm strength that they need to really get those fine motor skills eventually too. Like I said, Theraputty or Play-Doh, huge one. We love using those in the clinic, and every kid loves finding things in the Play-Doh, searching for things in the putty, really pulling and pushing it and seeing how strong they are and how well they can really pull and push it. Facilitation of grasp with alternative items. So for example, pinching and flipping and different like handwriting activities, warm-up activities is what we call them. So not only, I'll show you guys an example, but not only are they holding the pencil, but are they able to like manipulate that pencil in their hand. So for example, pinch and flip would be, oh, we pinch it and then we use our hand to flip it. So it's tricky, but it's a great way to really get those fine motor skills and get that kind of control, fine motor control we're looking for. And then another one would be in-hand manipulation. So you place a small item in their palm and they have to bring it to their pincer grasp, or their baby sharks is what we call it. Kids love to do that with any games. So we have a fun little dancing caterpillar at the clinic that I sometimes do it with, where I place the little ball that goes on the caterpillar's dancing arm, and they have to bring it to their baby sharks to put it on the caterpillar's hand. And they love that. So anyway, you guys can incorporate those. Those are some ideas for home, just to give you some strategies that you can utilize. Cool. So next we'll talk about visual motor skills.
So visual motor skills are, I feel like, used in so many things that we do every single day. It incorporates your visual system and coordinates it to movement. If you think about anything that we do during the day, it really does use both of those systems simultaneously at all times. So some examples for our kiddos are handwriting, more functionally tying shoes, buttoning, zipping, feeding themselves using utensils, catching a ball, completing cutting tasks. I feel like this impacts every area of OT. And if you think about it, these activities like handwriting, that's fine motor, but it's also visual motor. Tying shoes, that's self-care skills. Motor planning, catching a ball, that's a gross motor skill, but it also always incorporates visual motor skills. That's why we try to focus really on, if we see something that just doesn't seem right, we may refer to a vision therapist, just to make sure that there's nothing underlying that we might be missing. And then some of those other skills that we incorporate are visual perceptions, skills, visual scanning, again, scanning the environment. So, I often will say to one of my kiddos, hey, can you go grab me the red ball from the cabinet? Or can you go get me the orange marker from my pencil case? And that is them using their visual scanning skills to look into the pencil case and say, Ashley said she needs the orange marker. I need to sift through this and find it, and kind of discriminate to give her what she requested. And then the visual processing, that is another one that is a key role in how our kiddos learn. So that is key in math, in reading, in writing, the ability to process the information that they're seeing through their eyes and complete the next steps.
Cool. So here are the developmental milestones for shapes and handwriting, which, as Ashley mentioned, are a piece of our visual motor integration skills. So these helpful little diagrams or charts are actually available on one of the resources we've made with Therapy Materials Vault, and our graphic designer at our company. And they created these really handy little charts that can help you kind of decipher with like what age they are and maybe what shape they should be working on, or maybe like they're 3 and we don't know if they should be doing letters yet, like should they know how to write their name. So this kind of gives you a little overview of it. It's really handy. I like the way it is organized. But to just walk through it, kiddos from 2 to 3 years are expected to be able to copy vertical lines, horizontal lines, circles, and then they may start imitating plus signs. So when we say imitation, we mean maybe we're drawing on a whiteboard or drawing on a piece of paper and we draw a cross and then they're able to form a cross. So they see us do it first. Therefore, they're imitating that formation. And then from 3 to 4 years, the vertical line, horizontal line, and circle are formed from memory. And then they're able to copy that plus sign. So the difference between imitation and copying is when they're imitating, you're doing it first. So then they see how to do it. Versus copying, the shape is in front of them, and then they know how to form it just by seeing the shape. And then from 4 to 5 years, that's the pre-K age. they'll be forming those shapes that they were from 3 to 4 years. And then they'll also be copying a plus sign. And then they're starting to copy those right and left diagonal lines, that X shape. And then they're going to be practicing on imitating a square. And then from 5 to 6, we're going to be working on forming from memory all of those shapes all the way to our X. And then we'll be copying harder shapes like squares, triangles, and then we're going to start copying those greater complexity shapes. So maybe it's like a star or a moon or a crescent. We'll start being able to copy those at age of like 5.5 years. And then onto letters. We typically, as OTs, the way we formulate our goals is we make sure they are at that shape norm before we even introduce those letters. So we want to make sure they have those crosses down, they have those circles down, they're starting those squares, and then that might be where we start to introduce letters. So that's like something big and key. I feel like just to explain to parents, we have to have those foundational skills of knowing those shapes first before we even introduce the letters. So as you can see on the diagram on the right with our letters, uppercase letters will be able to imitate from 4 to 5 years. They can start recognizing and imitating lowercase letters at 4 to 5 years, and then numbers are recognizing and imitating at 4 to 5 years. And then 5 to 6 is when they're going to be forming them from memory. So parents always ask me, like, should they be tracing letters? Like, is this a right age for them to trace? And I'm always pro tracing. Like, if you want to trace letters, go ahead. They can get familiar with those letters, and that's awesome. But I wouldn't expect them to trace them perfectly or know perfectly how to trace them if they haven't been able to copy a cross. So that's just something to remember, that those shapes always come first, and then we move into letters. And then other factors that might be affecting their shape and handwriting development include that hand strength, the oculomotor control that we were talking about, so their vision. And that might be why we recommend out to vision therapy if we start to see those difficulties with those copying shapes and copying letters. Their grasp development. So are they able to use a tripod grasp like Ashley had mentioned, or are they still using that fisted grasp? That kind of goes hand in hand with that hand strength. And then lastly, visual attention. Do we have the ability to sit and copy it for a long period of time, or is it just something we're not there yet? We can't sit there for longer than 2 seconds and we're just not into it. So those are all the factors that might be affecting to that developmental piece. I don't know, Ashley, if you have anything with your school-based experience, if you have anything to add to this, feel free.
Yeah, one thing that I just wanted to add to think about is, often some of the handwriting curriculums, the ones that I'm most familiar with, do teach certain letters first. So if you think about the alphabet, especially the uppercase, the handwriting curriculum that I have always followed teaches uppercase letters first in specific letters. And if you see, if you look over to the shapes, they kind of go, they do go in order of development. So we first teach letters that involve vertical and horizontal lines. If they don't have the ability to form from memory vertical and horizontal lines, we're not going to get those letter formations. So some of the letters that we start with are uppercase E, F, H, I, L, T, some of those letters that only require a vertical and a horizontal line. And then we kind of move to, the diagonals. So those other letters, if you think about it, your kiddos might have more difficulty forming, let's say an A or an M, a W, even some of those curved letters. So like B, G, things like that. Those are tough because those are developmentally a little more difficult. So that's why we also want to make sure that these shapes and these lines are mastered first before we start to move on to letter formations.
Perfect. Awesome. And then I think next you have the at-home strategies. So go ahead.
This is something that I said we would talk about later, but this is so important, the 90-90-90. And I'm sure that some of the parents that have maybe had to work from home since the pandemic, you might be sitting at a desk and realizing like, wow, I'm very, uncomfortable throughout the day. And it might be cut. You maybe have gotten a new chair or a new desk or, things like that. So we always want to ensure that our bodies are in that 90, which is the elbows are at 90 degrees, your hips are at 90 degrees, and then your knees are at 90 degrees for optimal positioning. Another thing that is major is that we want to make sure that, our feet are touching the ground. We have some very small kiddos or, large furniture that doesn't fit or isn't optimal for learning. Especially I saw this in the schools a lot. Kids were doing school from the dining room table or in their bed, things like that. They were fatiguing very easily. So this is so important to make sure that posture is addressed before we start to do some of these activities. If you think about it, like if you're writing a birthday card on the couch, like your handwriting might not be as good as it would be if you were sitting at a desk. Using sensory modalities. So this is something that we love to incorporate as OTs. We love to get creative. We like to be fun. Using shaving cream to draw shapes, using paint to finger paint or draw letters, using sand in a sandbox. I'm sure we've all, made words in the sand at the beach. That's a great sensory modality. And it allows us to kind of generalize those skills, not always writing the same shapes and letters on pieces of paper. That's why we use whiteboards and chalk and different things like that, so that we can kind of get that sensory input from different modalities that we use. Altering the surface. So I oftentimes have kiddos use draw or make shapes on paper on the wall. So you could either tape it, or I often have them hold it for bilateral coordination. So stabilizing the paper as we write on the wall. Using guessing games, so drawing in the air, drawing the letter on somebody's back and trying to guess what letter or shape that they're doing. Writing with a flashlight. Some of those activities, finding the letters or the shapes in the environment. That's always a fun one. Like I spy a square, I spy the letter A, things like that. You do it in the car, you do it in the grocery store. And then at the end here is what we talked about a little bit earlier, just tracing, imitating, and then copying. That's kind of the progression that we want to see. And then obviously after copying, forming them from memory.
Great. So our next thing, our next visual motor skill that we'll talk about is cutting development. So cutting development is something that comes with exposure. So sometimes when I have a referral come to me, I'll have parents say when I introduce scissors to maybe a 2-year-old, they're like, whoa, I've never even thought to give them scissors. So this is something that's totally normal, because I feel like some parents just don't expose their children to scissors until later in life. So we see kind of those varying levels, but these are the basis of what should be expected developmentally based on their age. So at 2 years, a child should be able to hold scissors and snip paper on their own. At 2.5 years, they're able to cut across a 6-inch piece of paper on their own. From 3 to 3.5, they're able to cut on a straight line. From 3.5 to 4, they're able to cut out a circle. And then from 4 to 5, they're able to cut out other geometric shapes, kind of like squares, triangles, those other little shapes that are a little bit more complex than a circle. And then 6 years, they're able to cut out a variety of more complex shapes. So that's just something that I feel like parents are always like, oh my goodness, 2 years old, I'm not going to give my child scissors at 2 years old. But these are the norms that we go off of when we do evaluate a kid. So in case you were wondering why we're giving your 2-year-old scissors, there's the evidence behind it. But other factors that may be affecting cutting skills could include their ability to use both hands. So that bilateral coordination piece we were talking about, if they are having a hard time holding the paper while cutting is going to be way harder. If they're having trouble using both hands at all in the middle of their body, cutting is going to be super tricky. Once again, that hand strength, that visual attention, and that oculomotor control or their vision piece, those are all pieces that could affect this. And I also put in there their safety awareness. So if we just have scissors and we're flinging them around, that might also impact our cutting skills because we may not have as much exposure with it too, because we just don't have that safety awareness piece.
So some at-home strategies. We always start, if the kiddo doesn't have any experience with scissors, we typically start with spring-loaded scissors to cut, which is, they're also called safety scissors, and there's a lot of different variations of them on the internet, on Amazon and things. This is an example of the ones that I use. So if you see, just naturally, it's open. When you put your hand and you squeeze, then it closes. So you have to be able to squeeze in order for this to come down. What I typically do is I'll kind of do hand over hand and I'll just say squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And we get that down first when we'll just snip the paper. And then eventually, you know, we'll start to move forward and cut the paper in half. Once they get that down and that we realize that that hand strength is there, then we can move on to the regular scissors. But that's kind of the progression that we usually take. Cutting Play-Doh with spring-loaded scissors. And if you think about it, Play-Doh, I feel like they always have plastic scissors. If you are scared to use real scissors with your kiddos, you can start with those Play-Doh scissors and have them cut the Play-Doh, which is a safe way to introduce those scissors. Engaging in tasks that incorporate both hands, as we talked about. So making sure that, you know, they're using that opposite hand to stabilize the item and push or pull. There's a ton of toys that involve stabilizing the base of it to push. If you think about it, Mr. Potato Head and the pop beads, things like that, that involve both of those hands. More functionally, it would be like opening water bottles, opening food packages, buttoning, zipping, things like that. You need to use both of your hands and incorporate both of them simultaneously. And then hand and upper arm strengthening activities, like we said, the wheelbarrow walks, the Theraputty, Play-Doh, engaging in activities on our belly to weight bear on both of our arms. I'll often do, like, if we're doing a puzzle, maybe we'll have them do it lying on their belly, on their elbows. We often use various kinds of swings that incorporate upper extremity weight bearing. And then also just, you know, functionally, if you're at home, if I'm eating, if mealtime kind of runs into one of my sessions, I'll work on opening food packages with my kiddos because it's really functional. You know, it's often like, I see a lot of parents, you know, like, I'll open that for you. Or even like some of us, like, I'll do it. I'll open that for you when I'm really like, oh, they should be working on this so that they can be more independent. And then another one would be, you know, just having them engage in different other functional activities at home. Like we said, dressing, pulling your socks on, things like that. Those all require hand and arm strength. So those are good activities too. And it's less work for you, parents. So.
Okay, and then our other activities to strengthen visual and motor skills too. So puzzles are a great way to encourage and build visual motor skills. The progression of puzzles, I feel like a lot of parents ask, like, when should they be doing interlocking puzzles? Should I buy them this puzzle or this puzzle? So we always say, like, insert puzzles first. So those are like your shape or your animal puzzles where you get the actual piece of the animal with no peg on top. Kind of like those peg puzzles are the ones picture in the middle that I have down here. The insert puzzle is you just put that shape into the spot where it goes. After we've mastered those insert puzzles, we'll upgrade to those peg puzzles, as I noted down there, where they have to use that pincer grasp. Here we are using those fine motor skills with those visual motor skills. They'll use that pincer grasp to put in those puzzle pieces. And then after we've mastered that, we'll upgrade to our interlocking puzzles. So those are the puzzles we do, where you have to put the pieces together, find where they go. And typically we'll start at like 2-piece puzzles, then we'll go to 4-piece puzzles, then we'll go to 6, and we'll upgrade with the amount of pieces to make it more challenging as we go on. Other ways, stacking blocks and imitating block structures. So a fun thing to do at home is like maybe you're building a castle and like you build a castle and then you have your kiddo copy the castle you built and see how they do. Like, can they imitate those 10 block structures? Can they imitate a 2 block structure? Just to see, work on those imitation skills, those visual motor skills too. Playing with toys such as Jenga, Light Bright, and Legos. Same thing. Can they imitate those different block structures? Those work on a lot of skills. Like, right, since those pieces are so small, would also be working on those fine motor skills. You can work on Legos with bilateral coordination skills because they have to pull and push those Legos together. So those are all ways to use those too. Other things for our older kiddos, we work on like connecting the dot exercises. So are they able to connect, like, for example, they're creating a picture of a dog and it starts from 1 and it goes to 10. They're connecting those dots like 1 to 2, 3 to 4, all up to make that dog picture. And mazes are another way for our older kids to work on those visual motor skills, to get from start to finish, to really hone in on that vision piece. And then last but not least, tanagrams is a good one. I put a picture right below the word, is a picture of tanagrams. I love them. Ways that I kind of manipulate them throughout my sessions is I'll have my kiddos do them on top of the shapes that are given. And then I will take them away and have them maybe copy on a blank piece or like a blank slab, because it's a little bit trickier to copy it than it is to do it over that form puzzle too. So those are some other activities to strengthen visual motor skills. Ashley, I don't know if you have any off the top of your head that you're thinking of either, but to add to.
No, I feel like a lot of, the older kids, I'm just thinking like color by number, and things like that. I feel like these are a lot of the activities that we do in the clinic, but just a lot of copying, imitation and things like that, which can really be incorporated into anything at home as well.
Yeah. And I feel like too, another one that I forgot to mention was scavenger hunts.
Yeah.
I love to do scavenger hunts with my kiddos. And I always encourage parents to do this. Like, oh, maybe we hide the puzzle pieces around the room and we say, okay, go find them and see if they could find them, because they're working on those visual motor skills, but they're also working on those vision skills in general. So they're scanning their environment, they're discriminating where those pieces would be and all of those things too. And it's a fun one. Every kid loves to go find something. It's always a little surprise. So all right.
So overall, fine motor and visual motor skills are few of the, as we said, that large umbrella, the areas that we address as OTs, and they encompass many things. If your child currently gets OT, you can ask them if you have any questions or concerns, or you could always reach out to any of us. If your kiddo doesn't get OT and you're wondering if they should be. So we are happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.